Today on the Cutting Edge, we're with Chuck Devore. Chuck Devore is probably one of the more interesting people that we've ever met in the political arena. The reason why is we met him back in the 80s, believe it or not, when Chris Cox was our congressman here from the 48th District. And Chuck was one of his aides, one of his able and brilliant aides, by the way, we might add. And we had some dealings with him and with Chris, and it was all very, very good. All came out very, very good. What we discovered was that Chuck Devore was a dedicated Reagan Republican. Now that's, in this day and age, that's bandied about so much that, it almost has lost any meaning for what is truth. So a lot of people that saw pictures of Reagan claim that they were in the Reagan Revolution, but Chuck and Chris Cox, we believe, truly were people that were involved in the process and were actually doing the work. At any rate, this is an interesting show that we're trying to do today because of what Chuck's done. He was elected 4 years ago for the 70th Assembly District in California for state politics. He had a tough go of it, but made it through, and through all of the slings and arrows that came along the way, and has been doing a more than adequate job of representing the 70th District. It's hard to find anyone that doesn't like what Chuck does, which is amazing, again, in this day and age. You can't find that too often. Well, recently, Chuck has shocked us. Put us into, of course, everything shocks us now. We've got Obama presidency. We've got Sarah Palin trying to run for Robespierre of America. I don't know what she's running for, but it's a crazy situation there. The whole thing is upside down. Our economy's upside down. And on top of this, so Chuck has to step up to the plate in the middle of all this mayhem and do what? Well, he decides to run for the Senate of California against probably one of the more able and one of the more intelligent people in government, and that's Barbara Boxer. That doesn't mean that we like her politics. So what we have to give the devil its due for being so bright. She's an extremely bright person, and she's even responsive to her constituents, which is scary. But having said all that, we're going to welcome this wonderful guy who we love very much, Chuck Devore, to the program. We're going to try to get down into some very serious issues today that you may never hear anywhere else. So let's start off, Chuck, with the classic question: why?
Well, I don't believe that California can afford Barbara Boxer anymore. If you look at her policies and how she really came to prominence in California politics, it really started with the anti-nuclear movement of the 70s, both in opposition to America's desire to defend itself against, at the time, a very aggressive and expansionistic Soviet empire, as well as the use of peaceful commercial nuclear power to generate electricity. The other thing that she really made her effort on was stopping any domestic oil production. She just seems to have this thing about preventing the domestic oil production and wanting us to import more oil from overseas, sending our hard currency earnings to countries, many of whom hate us and some of whom directly fund terrorism. And then lastly, of course, she's never met a tax increase she doesn't like. And so if you look at those things, California today just announced its unemployment numbers for the month of October. We are now up to 8.2% unemployment. We had a 0.5% increase in unemployment. We're tied for the third worst in the nation. I believe, unfortunately, before this economic slowdown gets over, we're likely to see unemployment in California in the mid 9%, and I don't think that we can afford her sorts of policies anymore. Instead of no, let's not have any oil drilling, let's not have any nuclear power, and let's not have tax relief, I think we need the opposite. And I think that'll get Californians working again and contribute to our economy.
Okay, now listen, this is important because, what our first thought was when we heard that you were running against Boxer. It wasn't so much that you weren't the better candidate. That had really not much to do with it. What it had to do with was the fact that a guy by the name of Arnold Schwarzenegger will be leaving government on that year, and he might want to run for Barbara Boxer's seat as well.
He may.
Which may mean that you may have to run against Arnold in the primary.
He may.
And as you have mentioned in your fundraising letters that you sent to us, and I'm sure several others, you're looking at $25 million to collect in order to make yourself a viable candidate. And we know that Barbara's going to get help from Obama and doing wonderful work
Right.
on the web and all these other things to get that grassroots level of participation up in the state of California if she really wants to do it.
Right.
Now, let's step back from this just a tad, and we'll start with the basics. You're in the Assembly of the state of California.
Yes.
How many Republicans are in the Assembly?
Well, after this election, we have 30 Republicans
Out of how
80
many?
in the Assembly. 30 out of 80.
Okay.
Assembly districts in California range between 450 to 500,000 people that we represent. They're the
Right.
fourth largest legislative jurisdiction in America, after, of course, California Senate seats, then congressional, then the Senate out of Texas, and then California
Okay. Now, do
Assembly.
they have a filibuster-proof majority?
Well, we don't have a filibuster in the legislature of California, but what we do have is a two-thirds requirement to pass budget and taxes, and the Democrats do not have two-thirds in either house.
So they need at least 10 of your votes?
They need 2 votes in the Senate and 4 votes in the Assembly.
That's it, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we just had a word from Governor Schwarzenegger that we're looking, and he's always very conservative about these numbers, by the way. But he says recently, $28 billion in deficits are projected for the state of California, and this doesn't count if the fact is that the economy goes down further, foreclosures go on greater,
Right.
We have a devaluation of real estate values
Sure.
in the state of California. Things could look really bad. I mean, maybe double, right?
Right. Although that deficit projection is for 2 fiscal years. It's basically between now and the end of the current fiscal year in June 30th of 2009, and then taking it on from July 1st of 2009 to June
All right.
30th of
Now,
2010.
now, what he wants to do recently in today's paper, he wants to triple our car licenses.
Right.
And here's this worst economy in 100 years,
Right.
and we're going to triple our car licenses, which weren't really. They weren't, as John and Ken say, when Gumby was in business, that caused him to lose the election.
Right.
So, and now we're talking about Gray Davis for those
Yeah.
people who aren't familiar with that, the salutary term Gumby.
Right.
So, but I'm just mentioning that. So here we are. We're looking at a tremendous deficit.
Yes, we are.
What could we cut back?
Well, I think the important thing to look at is the fact that we have had about 40% growth in government spending since Governor Schwarzenegger was elected. We didn't eliminate one department, not one commission. We didn't cut back anything. Nothing was reformed. We didn't cut up the credit cards like the governor said we were going to do. We didn't
Right.
blow up the boxes. No reform, no reduction in the growth of spending. If you just went back and spent what government spent 3 years ago, we could balance this budget. That's all it takes. We've just grown so much in the last 5 years. It wouldn't take much to roll it back. Now, the question is, what is the best way to meet the current budgetary deficit gap? It's important for your viewers to know that California has the highest income tax rate in the nation. We have the highest gas tax in the nation. We have the highest sales tax rate in the nation. We have the highest corporate tax in the western United States. And contrary to popular mythology about Proposition 13 and property taxes, our property taxes are actually at the national average. You put all that together, and California has, depending on how you look at it, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th most taxed state in the country.
Now, I
And
got to
so-
ask a question here because I'll forget this if I don't ask it now.
Yeah.
Proposition 13 is a big thing with a lot of people.
Yes.
If you talk to people that have property in the
Yes.
state of California, they're going to tell you that their tax assessor is going to add maybe 2 or 3% a year.
That's correct.
Just
2%.
2% a year
Right.
to the value of their property, whether it goes up or not.
Right.
Now, we're just guessing. Now, and this is total guesstiture, but think this out. If the value of the property in 2006 reverts to the value of the property in 1998
Right.
or before,
Right.
then how in the world can these assessors continue to assess
Well,
this higher rate?
That's of course a local property tax issue, county by county. The way it's supposed to work is, let's say you were lucky enough to buy your property back in 1978 when Prop 13 was passed. Well, you're probably still catching up to the value of that property in 1978 at 2% per year, even with the current devalued cost of your home. If, however, you bought your home 2 years ago, then it is just a simple paperwork drill to apply to reassess the baseline to your assessor and say, look, I may have bought this home for $500,000, but it's now worth $300,000. And they have to take a look at that and reassess your property value at the lower value. So you're not supposed to be paying more property taxes than your house is actually worth.
I'm thinking of places like Stockton where there's a devastation row. I mean, there are just foreclosure after foreclosure after foreclosure, and the few houses that are remaining there, it doesn't seem to be the fair thing to do to be raising their property taxes.
They need to go through their county assessor and ask for a reassessment. That's fairly easy to do, and the assessor is automatically supposed to.
Okay, I'm taking away time from you, and I don't want to do that.
It's all right. Good questions.
But I think it's important for people out there. They want to know these things.
Sure.
Now, okay, so we're in this terrible malaise. And you're stepping up to the plate now to go to the national level.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Going to the national level right now looks like a death wish. I mean, every single, whether it's Citigroup, all the banking people are all on iffiness. Everybody thinks that they're worse than used car salesmen. I mean, I think used car salesmen are in a pretty good spot right now because they know that nobody's buying. So you know what I'm saying? This is really a bad situation for bankers, for companies at large, the big three. So I'm going to kind of step up out of this California malaise for a minute, and let's get into some things that you may differ with Barbara Boxer on, and you also may have some feelings about.
Right.
Let's start with the big one. The big one was the Hank Paulson, Ben Bernanke bailout.
Absolutely.
All right. Now here, I'm just going to give the background for the people that are out there. We had several members of our congressional district in the Congress here in Southern California that voted against the bailout.
Yes.
We had a few that voted for it.
Right.
One was David Dreyer, and another one that was John Campbell, our guy right here in the 48th to replace Chris Cox. We tried our best to tell him, don't do this.
Right.
Anyway, tell us what you would have done had you been at the senatorial level.
Well, I actually wrote a piece against the bailout. I'm also opposed to taking taxpayer money to bail out the big three automakers. Let me explain briefly where I think we went wrong with this economic crisis that we find ourselves in. The problem that really started this was the fact that you have two government chartered agencies in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, created by the government, that ended up with loan ratios of about 80 to 100 to 1. In other words, the loans on their books that they bought, the mortgage securities that they purchased, versus the assets backing them, they had about $1 in assets for every $80 to $100 in outstanding loans. Now, as you may recall from our recent campaign, the Republican nominee for president, Senator John McCain, actually was part of a group of Republican senators that tried very hard to get Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to have to come under different rules so that they could no longer have such enormously leveraged investments, and furthermore, that they wouldn't be able to continue to underwrite without any fear of losing their own money these no documentation, no money down loans.